At exactly 7:14, a Russian Su-35 was shot down over Kursk, deep inside Russian territory. The jet was supposed to be untouchable, protected by some of the most advanced air defenses in the world. Yet in seconds, it was gone. A fireball in the sky and wreckage scattered across the ground. Russia stayed silent. Ukraine confirmed the kill, but revealed nothing about how it happened. No weapon, no pilot. So what really brought down one of Russia's most advanced fighters in its own backyard? Join Military Power as we uncover the real weapon behind the strike. Just hours before that explosion over Kursk, Russian radar stations were running what they considered routine patrols. The Su-35 involved wasn't just any jet. It was one of the crown jewels of Russia's Air Force. Twin Saturn AL-41 F-1S engines capable of pushing Mach 2.25. A powerful Urbis-E radar able to track 30 targets at once, and a weapons suite designed to dominate anything in the air. On paper, it was untouchable. That's why the official Russian briefing that morning sounded confident. The Su-35 was flying a border security mission 16 kilometers inside Russian territory. Its pilots had every reason to believe they were safe from Ukrainian attack, especially deep in the Kursk region, far from the front lines. But here's the reality. Since 2023, Ukraine's long-range strike capabilities have been expanding in ways Moscow never fully acknowledged. Systems like the American-made Patriot PAC-3 have quietly shifted the rules, reaching targets where Russia assumed only its own aircraft could operate freely. And while the headlines screamed F-16 victory, behind the scenes, military analysts were asking a different question. Was this really an air-to-air kill, or something far more calculated? Because in modern warfare, the most dangerous shot is the one you never see coming, and the Su-35's pilot never had a chance to react. By the time the sun was fully up over Kursk, the rumor mill had already gone into overdrive. Ukrainian social media channels, Telegram groups, and even Western defense bloggers were buzzing with the same electrifying claim. An F-16 had just scored its first kill against a Russian Su-35. The story had all the ingredients of a perfect headline. A sleek Western jet, newly delivered to Ukraine, facing off against one of Russia's most advanced fighters and winning. It was the kind of narrative that didn't just travel fast, it detonated across the information space, rippling outward like shockwaves from the fireball still fading in the sky. Within hours, major outlets in Europe and North America were running variations of the same theme. Headlines spoke of a shift in air power and a symbolic turning point in the war. Television panels rolled out animated graphics of AMRAAM missiles streaking toward a Russian target, framed by footage of Ukrainian pilots climbing into cockpit ladders. Even defense forums, the kind where professionals and enthusiasts dissect every frame of combat footage, became mini battlefields of debate. Some members broke down engagement envelopes and radar lock times. Others argued over missile types, airframe loadouts, and whether a first strike F-16 mission over Russian soil was even tactically viable. The narrative was self-fueling, each new speculation adding weight to the belief that Ukraine's new air power had finally drawn blood. And yet, in the official channels, there was an odd stillness. Ukraine's Air Force did confirm the Su-35 had been destroyed, but the statement was almost surgical in its brevity. The target was neutralized in the Kursk direction. No mention of the F-16, no pilot names, no unit citations, no triumphant language, just the cold fact. For analysts who follow the war closely, that omission was glaring. By June 2025, Ukraine's operational F-16 fleet numbered barely a dozen aircraft. Most pilots had only recently completed conversion training from Soviet-era jets, a process that takes months, not weeks, to master at a combat-ready level. These aircraft were more likely to be tasked with defensive patrols over Ukrainian territory, intercepting drones or defending infrastructure, than slipping deep into contested airspace. And even if Kyiv had risked such a mission, the margin for error was vanishingly small. Kursk Oblast is not empty sky. It is ringed with Russian air defense, S-400 batteries with engagement ranges beyond 350 kilometers, overlapping with S-300s, Pantsir S-1s, and mobile Tor M2S, capable of tracking targets even at low altitude. An F-16 entering that zone without substantial escort and jamming support would be like a prizefighter stepping into a ring surrounded by armed guards. One wrong move, one radar ping too long, and the mission would end in a plume of wreckage. Still, Ukraine didn't rush to correct the story. That choice was telling. In the fast-moving arena of modern conflict, perception is as much a weapon as any missile. Every hour the F-16 rumor persisted, it sowed doubt in Russian minds. If they believed that Western jets were now actively hunting over Russian soil, it forced them to rethink everything: patrol routes, defensive alignments, even the positioning of command posts. The Kremlin's own media machine, usually quick to control the narrative, seemed momentarily caught off balance. Pro-war commentators dismissed the F-16 claim as Western fantasy, but the very need to address it signaled concern. Russian military bloggers began speculating about how far Ukrainian strikes could reach, and whether Moscow had underestimated NATO's level of involvement. That speculation, in turn, fueled even more Western coverage, a feedback loop Ukraine had no incentive to break. This was the first sign that the Kursk strike wasn't just about downing a single jet. It was about playing two games at once: the physical fight in the sky and the psychological one in the headlines. In modern warfare, what people think happened can be as potent, sometimes more so, than what actually did. And somewhere, far from the chatter, the real weapon that killed the SU-35 sat silent, its crew monitoring the noise from a distance. They knew the truth would remain buried for now. The longer the world debated, the longer their advantage stayed intact. In the war over perception, silence can be the loudest statement of all. By mid-afternoon, satellite imagery and open-source flight tracker data began to erode the F-16 narrative that had dominated the morning. Analysts combing through radar sweeps from NATO-aligned sensors found no verifiable track of a Ukrainian fighter anywhere near Kursk during the time of the shootdown. Civilian transponder records offered nothing either, which wasn't surprising for a combat mission. But what raised eyebrows was the absence of even faint, indirect signatures that normally hint at a jet's presence. Intelligence summaries added more weight to the doubt. At that point in mid-2025, Ukraine had barely a dozen operational F-16s, and many of those were engaged in defensive combat air patrols over central and western Ukraine, guarding critical infrastructure from missile and drone attacks, sending even one deep into Russian territory without a dedicated escort package. Suppression of enemy air defenses, electronic warfare cover, and aerial refueling would have been an extraordinary gamble. The airspace over Kursk wasn't just defended, it was saturated with overlapping S-400 and S-300 batteries, Pantsir point defense units, and roving Tor M2 systems. Then came the Swedish Saab 340A EW and C theory, floated by some online commentators. On paper, the Irii radar aboard the Saab could spot a Su-35 from hundreds of kilometers away. But spotting and killing are two very different things. Without Link 16 integration, the encrypted digital data link NATO jets use to share targeting data, there was no seamless way for an Irii crew to feed a firing solution to Ukraine's F-16s in real time. Any relay would have been slower, riskier, and less precise than the rapid machine-to-machine vectoring a modern intercept demands. The decisive crack in the F-16 story came from a more chilling source: leaked fragments of Russian pilot communications. Transcripts revealed that the Su-35's radar warning receiver first picked up a lock, likely from a tracking radar, but instead of fading as countermeasures deployed, the signal only grew stronger. 26 seconds later, the pilot's strained voice came over comms. "Missile inbound, Mach 5. The missile ignored chaff bursts and flares entirely, closing the distance with mechanical certainty. This wasn't the fluid, high-speed chess match of a dogfight. It was a ground-based kill, precise, disciplined, and executed so quickly that even Russia's most capable fighter couldn't break free. And in that precision lay the real clue. Whatever hit the Su-35 wasn't improvising. It had been waiting, quietly, for exactly this kind of target to cross into its trap. The pattern of the Kursk strike didn't match a sleek, cinematic dogfight. It didn't look like an AMRAAM screaming off the rail of an F-16 with the clean geometry of a radar picture fed from a Swedish Saab 340. Instead, it resembled something colder, quieter, the work of a hunter that didn't even need to be in the sky. A ground battery, disciplined, invisible, and devastating. The telltale signs were there for anyone who knew how to read them. The Su-35's radar warning receiver picked up a hard lock. Not a quick spike like you'd expect from an incoming fighter, but a sustained, tightening grip. The pilot rolled into evasive maneuvers, dumped chaff, triggered jammers, but the lock didn't weaken. Then came the sprint. Over 20 seconds of terminal closure, the range collapsing at roughly Mach 5. Flares burned uselessly in the sky. The missile never flinched. That combination of behaviors, unshaken by jamming, immune to decoys, accelerating in a perfect endgame arc, points to one family of weapons, the Patriot PAC-3, specifically the MSE interceptor. And here's why this matters. The PAC-3 MSE isn't a traditional anti-aircraft missile that rides a fixed radar beam. It's a hit-to-kill weapon, essentially a high-velocity spear, built to destroy not just incoming missiles, but high-value aircraft. The kill chain starts long before launch. First, a network of sensors, some active radars, some passive receivers quietly listening, forms a track of the target. This track can be passed between nodes without revealing the battery's location. When the moment is right, the PAC-3 MSE launches, and its guidance shifts into track via missile. The interceptor itself becomes part of the sensor network, feeding back its own perspective so the fire control radar can refine the solution in real time. In the final seconds, the missile switches to its own active seeker. There's no beam to break, no big radar head to blind, no simple trick to shake it. The pilot feels the lock not as a flicker, but as a vice tightening. Every countermeasure, jamming pods, chaff, flares, becomes dead weight. When the terminal window opens, the missile commits. At closing speeds above 5,000 kilometers per hour, there is no second chance. Could such a shot reach a Su-35 over Kursk? Under the right conditions, yes. Engagement envelopes aren't perfect circles drawn on a map. Altitude, heading, and timing matter. A high-flying Su-35 patrolling near the Ukrainian border, perhaps nosing south to sweep for drones or creeping closer to sanitize airspace, might drift into a thin corridor where a forward-positioned Patriot battery could strike. Add external cueing from dispersed sensors, maybe airborne, maybe hidden in civilian infrastructure, and the window might only last seconds. But seconds were all it needed. This theory also explains the silence from Kiev. Admitting a Patriot kill would reveal capabilities, firing locations, and coordination methods, information far too valuable to hand over to Moscow. Far better to let the internet and Russian media obsess over the idea of an F-16 slipping past their defenses. While they chase one phantom, the real killer remains in the shadows, free to strike again. In the battles of the 21st century, the deadliest fighter isn't always the one in the sky. It's the network, the sensors that whisper, the shooters that wait, and the split-second decisions that close the trap before the target even knows it's there. Over Kursk, that network tightened like a snare, and when it snapped shut, even one of Russia's most advanced jets couldn't break free. The missile strike over Kursk was not just a clean tactical kill. It was the opening move in a long game of mental warfare. By letting the F-16 rumor run wild across news feeds and evening broadcasts, Ukraine planted a seed of doubt that would grow inside every Russian cockpit and command center. The beauty of the deception lay in its simplicity. Give the enemy two nightmares instead of one. The first was the visible threat, a Western fighter jet with NATO pedigree, sleek and symbolic, a political message in itself. The mere idea that F-16s might be pushing deep into Russian airspace played perfectly in headlines, rallying Western audiences and undermining the Kremlin's claim of total air dominance. Every photo of a Ukrainian pilot standing beside an F-16 became a psychological pressure point, a reminder that the war's technology gap was narrowing. The second was the invisible threat, a Patriot PAC-3 battery, hidden somewhere beyond the horizon, capable of reaching into Russian skies without a hint of warning. Unlike a jet, it left no radar shadow until the lock was already unbreakable. Its presence could not be confirmed until it struck, and by then, it was too late. For Russian pilots, this new dual reality rewrote the rulebook. Each patrol was no longer just a matter of scanning for enemy aircraft. It became a constant calculation of unseen dangers. Do you climb higher for better radar coverage and risk sliding into Patriot range? Do you drop low to avoid missiles and make yourself an easier target for ambush by fighters? Even their standard flight paths, once predictable and efficient, now had to be bent and broken to hedge against the unknown. This shift was costly in more than fuel. It drained focus. Pilots were burning mental energy on defense instead of offense, on survival instead of mission. In high-tempo air warfare, that mental tax accumulates fast, and fatigue, not just firepower, can decide who wins a campaign. For Moscow's planners, the effect was even more corrosive. Every possible countermeasure came with trade-offs. Deploy more air defenses to cover F-16 threats, and you spread your radar net too thin to reliably block cruise missiles. Pull back your most advanced fighters to avoid Patriot kill zones, and you surrender air presence over contested regions. Rotate squadrons more often to reduce pilot fatigue, and you accelerate wear on airframes already strained by wartime use. The brilliance of Ukraine's move was that it didn't require a second shot to maintain pressure. The fear was self-sustaining. Even if no more Patriots fired for weeks, Russian operations still had to account for them as if they might strike at any moment. In modern war, perception is often more persistent than reality, and a threat you think is everywhere can be more paralyzing than a threat that actually is. By weaponizing uncertainty, Ukraine achieved something that hardware alone rarely can. It forced its opponent to fight an invisible enemy that lives rent-free in their head. And in doing so, a single missile over Kursk became more than a kill. It became a standing order in the Russian Air Force's playbook. Fly like you're already in someone's crosshairs. When the smoke over Kursk finally thinned, the scene on the ground told a story that no press release could soften. Twisted fragments of titanium skin lay scattered across open farmland. The tail section, once a symbol of Russian engineering pride, jutted from the earth at an unnatural angle, its serial markings still visible under a layer of scorched paint. The cockpit canopy lay meters away, cracked and blackened, the ejection seat missing, a silent witness to the pilot's split-second gamble to live. This was not the debris of an obsolete aircraft. The Su-35 represented the pinnacle of Russia's fourth-generation fighter program, a $50 million machine built for speed, agility, and survivability. Yet all of that had evaporated in less than 30 seconds. The kill was clean, clinical, and left no room for recovery. In warfare terms, it was a statement. No matter how advanced the airframe, it could be plucked from the sky if the network hunting it was faster, smarter, and better connected. Ukraine's real achievement, however, was not in the physical destruction of a single jet. It was in shifting the psychological balance. This strike proved that a missile launched from the ground, guided by a dispersed and concealed sensor web, could erase a high-value target in what was supposed to be its safe zone. And by letting the possibility of an F-16 kill run unchecked, Kyiv ensured the victory played out twice, once in the air and once in the mind. For Russian pilots, the loss wasn't just about losing a comrade or an aircraft. It was about losing the illusion of control over their own battle space. From now on, every sortie carried the shadow of two predators, the jet you can see and the missile you can't. That doubt creeps into every decision: which route to take, which altitude to hold, how aggressively to engage. Even the most confident pilot flies differently when he's never sure which second will be his last. For the Kremlin's military planners, the implications were strategic and long-term. Air patrol patterns had to be rewritten, defensive coverage redistributed, and risk assessments recalculated. Every adjustment cost resources, time, and political capital. And in a war where narrative is as important as territory, the image of a burning Su-35 in Russian airspace sent a message to the world: Ukraine can reach you, and you may not even see it coming. In modern warfare, there are no truly safe skies. Every radar ping could be a warning, every faint signal a prelude to a strike. The most dangerous weapon is no longer the one you can identify. It's the one hidden behind layers of deception, waiting for the moment when your guard slips. So now, the question is yours. What do you believe truly brought down the Su-35? A fighter jet prowling in the clouds, or a missile climbing unseen from beyond the horizon? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to Military Power so you don't miss the next time the sky changes in an instant. See you next time.